Okay, so you or somebody that you know is planning to major in music. Now, obviously, the audition itself is probably the most important part, and knowing your instrument the best that you can to get ready for the audition is really important. But what if you do all that, you've been taking lessons, you've been practicing, all that good stuff, and you need to actually get ready for the school itself? Now, unlike other majors where the classes that you take for them are not always that important, it doesn't really work the same way with music. Not only are you expected to do pretty well in them, but you're also expected to take them pretty seriously because a lot of them can tie directly into what you're going to be doing in your career. Anyway, my name is John and welcome back to another episode of For The Classical Guitarist, even though this one I think applies to all musicians, not just aspiring classical guitarists. In this video, I want to talk to you about some of the things that I wish somebody told me when I was trying to get myself ready for music school. So let's get started. So before I get started, I do just want to say that everything I'm going to be talking about is really just my opinion based off of my own personal experiences. And I definitely recommend for you to go out and check out other resources as well as talk to other teachers and musicians. So to start off, I want to talk about one of the dreaded class of most music majors, and that would be beginner piano. Now, every music school, as far as I know, at least in the United States, requires everyone to take at least 4 semesters of beginner piano. That's about 2 years of taking piano, and unfortunately in these classes, they want you to take it pretty seriously, at least in my experience. They're expecting you to practice piano at least half an hour to maybe even an hour a day on top of your standard practice. And especially because it's in a class setting, they don't have time to cater to everyone's individual needs and struggles. So you have to kind of do a lot of this for yourself, and as a musician, you're expected to know how to do this pretty well. As any music major will probably tell you, is finding even an hour to practice even your main instrument is going to be a struggle with all the extra coursework, rehearsals, and everything else you have going on while you're in college. So to help yourself out, what I would recommend for piano is to just get started sooner. So as soon as you're done with this video, I would recommend you to do 2 things. Number 1, go on over to Amazon or your local music store and buy a keyboard. It doesn't need to be the best thing ever, but as long as it's 88 keys and has some kind of weight to it so you can get the feel of a real piano and just get started today. The second thing I would highly recommend to do if you can would be to sign up for some beginner piano lessons with a teacher. Now, if you're in a situation where you can't take lessons, whether it's financial, based on your location, or just based on your own time that you have, then this is what I would recommend to do instead. Go online and learn your basic, major, and minor scale fingerings. There's going to be a website link down below over here and a picture of kind of a sample of that I would highly recommend to use this resource. On here you'll find scale fingerings, inversions, chords, and arpeggios for every single major and minor key. Definitely get on that. It's going to make it so much easier to get started because that's one of the first things, at least as far as I remember, that we learned in beginner piano class. The other thing that I would suggest for you to do would be just to find any basic piano method book and just start working out of it. Personally, I would highly recommend the Piano Adventures books. I find they're pretty straightforward and they teach you a lot of the stuff that you need to know, especially if you kind of come from a background with some musical understanding already. But any method book is fine. Now, the next thing that many musicians seem to struggle with would be music theory. Just like piano, you have to do 4 semesters of it. Now, for many classical guitarists, funny enough, this actually won't be so bad. But if you're only used to reading single lines, or maybe you're a guitarist and you're not the best reader, then this might be overwhelming to have to analyze multiple notes and figure out what chord they're playing. So the first thing that I would say to do is if you mainly read treble clef, go ahead and start practicing and learning how to read bass clef right now. And of course, if you read bass clef, you want to do the same exact thing for treble clef. The reason why is because once the class gets going, one of the first things that you're going to be asked to do is harmonic analysis. And I know that even sounds scary if you've never heard that term before, but being able to read treble clef and bass clef pretty comfortably will make things even less scary. And the reason why is because most of the harmonic analysis that you're going to be doing are going to be written in grand staff, also known as piano music. So if you're a pianist, you can kind of ignore this part because hopefully you can read treble clef and bass clef pretty well. Now, if you can, I would highly recommend to get to know some of these music theory terms. I'm not going to go too much into detail on them, maybe in another video, but some of these things would be understand how major and minor scales are built. Number 2 would be knowing how to build basic, major, and minor triads. And the final theory thing that I would say that you should know would be to know which chords belong to which scales. Okay, so now even though guitar players might be better at playing chords than someone who just plays a single-lined instrument, it doesn't help them out with this next thing. And this next thing would be just some basic ensemble playing. Once you go to college, one of the first things that you learn how to do as a guitarist is either playing in a chamber ensemble or playing in a guitar quartet or maybe even a guitar orchestra. Either way, we're used to playing alone, so we need some practice with this. Now, if your school, like many schools, doesn't have a guitar ensemble already or some kind of guitar program, it's totally fine. Hopefully you guys have some music program of some kind in there, and what I would recommend to do would be to just get involved in it, right? See if you can sign up to play the guitar in the jazz band, even if you don't consider yourself a great jazz guitar player. Go see if you can sign up for the school choir, even if you don't consider yourself a great singer. The main thing that you learn when you play with other musicians is you learn how to listen. And this is super important. You need to be able to adapt what you're doing if you hear someone doing something differently. You need to be able to understand what's going on in the music enough to make these changes not by yourself, but with a group of people. Things like learning how to breathe together, learning how to count together, learning when to listen for other people's entrances, learning how to play under somebody else conducting you. All these things are things that most guitar players don't know how to do, and it can be a little bit of a challenge when you start school and you have never done this before. One of the things that many people struggle with when getting ready for their college's ear training / aural skills course is being able to sing comfortably with other people, and not only being able to sing when you're singing the melody. When you learn how to sing in a choir, this is one of the things that's definitely taken care of for you, because no matter what voice section you are, you're always going to be singing the harmony at some point. Once you begin your ear training class, one of the hardest parts that people have a hard time with is really the class aspect of it. Having to sing in front of all these different people, some people that you just met maybe even that morning on the first day. Now, the other thing about ear training, which I'm not going to get into too much on this video, would be to know basic intervals. This would include things like understanding what a major second is, or major third, or a perfect fifth, or a perfect fourth. Understanding how those intervals sound, as well as also knowing what notes would make that interval, is going to be really helpful when it comes to getting ready for your ear training course. Now, what I would recommend, if you can, would be to go onto YouTube or go into Google and type in ear training basics or learning intervals and find songs that use certain intervals. So that way you can get the sound in your head and start singing them. Key thing there is start singing them. That way, when you're sitting down in class and your teacher gives you some music, you can identify, oh, C to G is a perfect fifth. And a perfect fifth, I know, sounds like the beginning of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, for example. And then you can sing it. I'm not saying it's going to make you perfect, but having a head start will definitely make it a lot easier. And finally, this last point, which I almost didn't include, but I decided to anyway because I do think it is really important, and that would just be to listen to more classical music. And if you're majoring in jazz, then obviously listen to more jazz music, but if you're a jazz player, you probably do that anyway. Now, the area that this would help you out would be in music history. For some people, music history can be pretty boring, especially if you don't like history yourself. I am definitely one of those people, but what I did to make it more interesting is I wanted to know more about the music that I was going to be learning about, and the first step was to just listen to that music. For me, it was just listening to the music to get to know it, and that way when we talked about it, I was like, oh yeah, I know this piece. I want to know more about it now. I want to know the background to why it was written, who wrote it, what were they doing in their life when they wrote it, and how did that affect the piece. Now, if you're not sure of where to get started, just because, yeah, there is so much stuff out there, I would highly recommend to go out and just get a copy of Classical Music for Dummies, and make sure you get one that has the audio CD along with it. This book is basically a simplified version of what you're going to be learning in your music history courses. But it'll be a good way to get you started, so that way you have some background to what you're going to be learning about in more detail in your music history course. And of course, the CD is super important to have, so that way you can listen to some of the examples that they're talking about. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. I did want to try something out that was just a bit different, something that didn't only help classical guitarists, but help just musicians and music students overall. Let me know in the comments if you like this kind of video or not, and stay tuned for more classical guitar content in the near future. If you're new here and you liked what you saw, I hope that you consider giving this video a like, dropping a comment down below, let me know if there's anything I missed or if the things that you wish I talked about in more detail. And if you really liked what you saw, I hope that you would consider subscribing to the channel to check out more videos about classical guitar. If you want to check out another video of mine, I would highly recommend to click on one of the videos that's going to be popping up over next to me in just a second. And yeah, that's all. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.